BYU football looks to bounce back as they take on the TCU Horned Frogs, the 12th-ranked Cougars in the college football playoff rankings, looking to prove that this is a team that's not going to let one loss turn into two as they did a season ago. Mitch, Harper, Kyle Ireland. We will be inside LaVell Edwards Stadium this Saturday night, 8:15 kick for the Cougs and the Horned Frogs. First visit to Provo for TCU since 2009. Kyle, your thoughts on this matchup and BYU's chances of actually bouncing back from a loss?
Yeah, the thing for me, Mitch, is a couple of weeks ago, they were heading into a bye after Iowa State, and the coaching staff and everybody was like, oh, we're going to do things differently than we did last year at the bye. And now they're saying all the right things about they're going to rebound from a loss different than they did last season when it became 2 losses in a row and really ended their season after the Arizona State loss. I'm interested to see if that actually occurs this week. Does BYU do what they say they're going to do and rebound from a loss? They're going to do things differently this year than they did in 2024 because, if they stumble in any of these 3 final games, Mitch, their season's essentially over.
As far as the playoff, yeah, they're out.
As far as the playoff is concerned, and that's their ultimate goal, right? I mean, it's to get to Arlington and then ultimately to be one of those final 12 teams to play for it all. And I want to see how this team responds mentally, physically. Like, is it going to be a game where they impose their will on TCU? Because there are going to be opportunities for BYU to have success in this game. It's just a matter of, is Josh Hoover going to be the one who beats them, or are they going to go out and are they going to beat TCU's defense after a really, pretty miserable performance on offense and special teams?
TCU 6-3 overall in their 3 losses, 3+ turnovers in each of the 3 losses. Turnovers haven't been a complete issue for TCU all season, but when they lose, they cough it up. So turnovers, one to watch. Josh Hoover, you brought up him. He put up a career high against BYU 2 years ago in his first career start. He was dynamic. I still remember that day in Fort Worth, how good he was. Because remember, that was a game where a little bit of a toss-up. BYU was coming out of a bye, and you thought, okay, BYU's got a chance here to maybe spring the upset. Josh Hoover had other plans as he went off for, 439 against BYU. Much better BYU defense this year, and I thought that was what was promising last week against Texas Tech. That was a bad game, 29-7 losing to Texas Tech. Texas Tech, I think they're potentially national championship good. A lot of respect for the Red Raiders and what they can become. Got some questions offensively, but BYU defensively, I thought they looked great, particularly the linebackers. I was just talking with Jack Kelly moments ago, and Jay Hill kind of hinted that they were probably the healthiest, that linebacker unit, in about a month. And Jack Kelly agreed with that, and that showed up in the stat line where Jack had 2 sacks, Glasgow had a sack, Cialiacera had a sack as well.
Yeah, and Josh Hoover and that TCU offense, they're 9th in the FBS this season in passing offense. And so, to be able to get home to the quarterback in a similar fashion like they did against Texas Tech, because I thought their front 7 did an excellent job being able to put pressure on the quarterback. And that's been, I don't think it's been like the strongest suit of BYU's defense this season. But if they can get pressure on Hoover to be able to force him into maybe some errant throws or, take a couple of bad sacks to really, settle things down for this BYU defense to get off the field, and then really, I think, put BYU's offense in the most optimal field position, because field position was such a concern against Texas Tech, who just dominated the field position game for BYU. And being back at home, I think, will be a big thing for BYU, because it seems crazy, Mitch. They haven't been at home since the Utah game, which seems like a month and a half ago.
Well, think about it. Only 2 of the last 7 games BYU's played at home. They started the first season 2-0. Both games were at home. Next 7 games, only 2 times they've played at home. This has been a team that's lived it on the road. And to be 8-1 with everything still in front of you, where I believe, Kyle, that if BYU wins out and goes 11-1, I don't care what happens in the Big 12 championship game, you should be into the playoff. In that championship game, you should be playing for seeding and potentially whether or not you're a home team in the first round or going on the road. So it will be good to get back at home.
Yeah, and I think that, this crowd, they're going to be amped up and ready to go, because I feel like BYU kind of thrives in these night games, Mitch. And, it might be a little brisk, but the crowd's going to show out. And, being back at LES and having I just love the 3rd to 4th quarter transition, all the entertainment factors that go into that. It wasn't like Texas Tech didn't have anything, but it's just not the same. BYU does an excellent job as far as the entertainment and the event around being just a football game. But I think that BYU, if they're going to win this football game, Mitch, they're going to have to throw the ball effectively because TCU's defense is going to allow for that. Their rushing defense is where I would be a little concerned, especially with LJ Martin's health a couple of weeks ago, and then what we really didn't see from him in the second half against the Red Raiders. And so if BYU is able to throw the ball effectively, I mean, you think about the West Virginia game where Bear was able to go off and throw for over 300 yards, and then he did it against Iowa State. I think if he can throw for 300 yards against TCU, BYU is going to come out with a victory.
Both of these teams, I think a point of emphasis is starting fast. Now, for BYU, I think there's context to that. Even Kalani Sitake addressed that this week where when asked about slow starts offensively, it's not solely slow starts on the offensive end. Go back to the Iowa State game. The offense was clicking right away. It's just digging yourself in holes. If it's not, and you talked about this in Lubbock, if it's not the offense, it's the defense that starts slower. The special teams, like, all three phases for BYU need to start strong. Same thing for TCU. They didn't score a touchdown to open things up against Iowa State. In some of their losses, they have started slow. Both teams looking to start strong, and that's going to be something that's kind of an area of focus. And we know the stats. I know Greg Wrubell's pointed to it too. When BYU scores first, they're almost just automatic victory. So maybe that's just the only key to the game in this one for the Cougars. But I think that will be something of focus, just to kind of right the wrongs from last week, because last week was such a tough spot for BYU. It was tough for TCU too at home against Iowa State, but for BYU in particular, just kind of get some good vibes back. And I think personnel-wise, relatively healthy for this BYU team. I know they're a little bit banged up, obviously, at defensive tackle with Anisi Purcell. Justin Kirkland, we found out officially that Jay Hill said, defensive coordinator for the Cougars, that they're going to redshirt him. He will be available in the postseason if BYU gets to a championship game or the playoffs or a bowl game. But they will plan to have him redshirt and come back in 2026. Same with Ephraim Asiata, a Sam linebacker. Nusi Tamoipeo is kind of taking his spot, but I think starting strong will be huge for this Cougar team.
Yeah, I think on the offensive side of things, starting fast is going to be critical, especially with Bear Bachmeier. I felt like he definitely had his worst game of the season. Aaron Roderick earlier this week talked about how Bear almost felt like he was all to blame, and he shouldered a lot of that burden for the performance in Lubbock. But to be able to get off to a good start offensively, and it really seems like it's been a while, Mitch, since BYU's played a clean game of football. I know that turnovers aren't everything, but they are critical in changing momentum of the game. And you think about just some of the turnovers Bear has had in particular, and then Parker Kingston, one of your most reliable offensive weapons, he's had some struggles in special teams. And so just being able to clean up those little things, and hopefully being back at home settles him down.
First time again since 2009 that TCU's coming to Provo. Any memories that stand out to you of BYU TCU over the years? I think back 2007, it was a Thursday night game. BYU and TCU in the old Mountain West. Last time BYU beat TCU, remember, it was 2006 and 2007 where BYU had breakthroughs against the Horned Frogs, and then it almost became a point of emphasis for Gary Patterson's program to have BYU tackling dummies, and they were gunning for BYU. A lot's changed since then, but any memories from back in the day between BYU and the Horned Frogs in the Mountain West, or even briefly in the Independence era for BYU?
Yeah, it seemed like there was a chance there for it to become a pretty good rivalry. Obviously, those teams in the Mountain West were right up at the top of the standings with Utah and just trying to fight for those BCS New Year's Six kind of games. I would also say my favorite moment is probably Riley Nelson high-fiving the referee there. That was iconic. And
2011 at Cowboy Stadium.
Yep, something that I think Cougar fans will look back on. I mean, you can go back on, I think Jiffy or whatever you call that app. It's always one that pops up, and you can get Riley high five.
You got that one. You got Taryn Houck at Nebraska. They're always the BYU in these high fives with refs. I don't know what it is. I think Houck actually hugged a ref, but yeah, BYU and TCU had some juice back in the day. I don't know if it's going to recapture that in the Big 12. It doesn't seem like that's much of a thing, but it's a good matchup, and TCU is very capable. I mean, you look at the recruiting cycles that Sonny Dykes has put together in Cowtown. It's a really good program. They got talent. So to suggest that you're going to just waltz into Provo and win this thing, you remember last November when BYU played Kansas? You lost in November. BYU hasn't been good in November since joining the Big 12. Only 2 wins in the month of November. Utah and Houston last year. Both of those teams had losing records. So BYU hasn't beat a team with a winning record in November since joining this league. So I think that will be kind of like a don't want to say moral win, but just like, hey, get a win over a quality team late in the season when you're supposed to be playing championship football late in the year. But it's going to be a good game. BYU and TCU, 8:15 kickoff on KSL News Radio. You can watch the broadcast on ESPN. We will get coverage started at noon with Cougar Sports Saturday on KSL News Radio. It's going to be a loaded Saturday. I mean, BYU sports fans, you got to be loving life right now. You got a top 10 basketball matchup, BYU and UConn in Boston. That's going to be epic. And then the Cougs kick it off in LES against TCU in Provo, 8:15. So busy day on KSL News Radio. We'll have full coverage on KSLSports.com and on Cougar Sports Saturday this weekend. So talk to you then here on KSLSports.com.